Once again, dungeons are the real meat and potatoes of any given Zelda title, so I'm here to talk about all of them. Welcome back to my Dungeons Ranked series, where I'm currently covering every 3D Zelda dungeon by release order of the games. Today we're talking about the Wind Waker HD, and full disclosure, this game is not only my favorite Zelda game, but my favorite video game of all time, so while this game certainly doesn't have the strongest dungeons, I still have some bias, but I'm going to try to be a bit more objective here. Due to various circumstances, Nintendo actually ended up having to cut 2 additional dungeons from this game, so today we'll be talking about 5, technically 6 dungeons, and 3 mini dungeons. But don't worry, apparently those 2 additional dungeon designs made their way to Twilight Princess, which will be our next game in this series. Nintendo didn't specify exactly which 2 they were, but pretty much all of Twilight Princess's dungeons are awesome, so we have that to look forward to. Here's a quick pet peeve I'm going to touch on. So this is the only 3D Zelda game where it doesn't display text of the boss name when you begin the boss fight. Every other 3D Zelda does it, but Wind Waker doesn't do it. So I'm going to be displaying some text myself, just so you guys know the name. Yeah. Anyways, without further ado, this is Dungeons Ranked, the Wind Waker. Okay, so yeah, when I said technically 6 dungeons, this is what I was talking about. You visit Forsaken Fortress twice, and only by counting both of those visits together would I consider this to actually be a main dungeon. So we'll talk about both visits in sequence. The first visit to Forsaken Fortress is a complete momentum killer in terms of game pacing. This is pretty much right at the beginning of the game. You lose your sword that you literally just obtained, so you're on a stealth mission to get to the top where both your sword and your kidnapped sister are located. If it's your first time playing this game, this visit sucks, as you might not know where to go or what to do, but if you're a veteran of this game like I am, you realize that this first visit can be sprinted through very quickly with very minimal stealth. All you have to do is kill one of the searchlights and then make your way to the top. But again, the game kind of punishes you for not knowing what you're doing, and you can very easily get thrown into a jail cell over and over if you're not sneaky enough in certain areas. When you reach the top, this giant bird, the Helmarok King, comes down, and you may think it's time to fight, but he just ends up grabbing you and tossing you out into the sea. Damn. The second visit to the Forsaken Fortress is honestly pretty awesome, I won't lie. About halfway through the game, you return, and this time more powerful and with vengeance in your soul. You show up and immediately fight the mini-boss, Phantom Ganon, which is just a standard energy ball tennis match that appears in many Zelda games. Phantom Ganon has a really cool design though, and the music goes crazy. When you beat him, you get the dungeon item, the Skull Hammer, this absolute behemoth. You then sprint your way to the top for an actual fight against the Helmarok King, and it is so cool. First, you have to ascend the tower as water slowly rises, dodging bokoblins along the way before reaching the top and actually beginning the fight. You use your new skull hammer to smash his face in, eventually destroying his mask. Then you wail on him with your sword until he's defeated. The second visit almost makes the first visit worth it. Since you're so underpowered on the first visit, it's really satisfying to come back and just storm the fortress and kill the Helmarok King. But due to the first stealth visit and also due to the lack of puzzles throughout both visits, I have to put Forsaken Fortress at the bottom of my list, unfortunately. Dragon Roost Cavern takes place within Dragon Roost Island and is technically the first real dungeon of the game, so it's the most simple and straightforward, but I think it has some very good design choices. Theming wise, it's kind of just a lava cave with a few ornate designs throughout, and the music is whatever, just some percussive noises and cave ambience. When you get to the central room, you see there's a locked door, but you have no key, so the dungeon takes you in a circle to obtain a key and brings you right back to the door, which I think it's just a good way to funnel you through this dungeon, especially since it's the first one. During this dungeon, you're taught that you can throw these big jugs of water onto lava to create platforms, and later you can throw them onto lava geysers to get blasted up to rooms above. You also learn that sometimes your sword isn't strong enough to cut through certain barriers, but you're able to pick up the larger weapons of your enemies to destroy them. As you progress, there are a few torch lighting puzzles and bokoblin fights until you begin to scale the outside of the dungeon on the way to the mini-boss, which is 2 stronger bokoblins and a big moblin. Once you beat them, you rescue the Rito girl Medley, who informs you that Valu, the giant dragon who sits atop the island, is irritated because something is bothering his tail, which hangs down into the room below. She then gives you the dungeon item, the grappling hook, which allows you to swing across gaps and even steal items from enemies like joy pendants and rupees. There are a few more swinging rooms and then the boss key room, where you have to stun this lava worm thing and set him down on top of a button in order to open the boss key chest. Then you backtrack up to the boss room and enter. This is Goma, sharing the same name as the first boss from Ocarina of Time, and is similarly sort of an insect or arachnid thing. And holy shit, my frame rate is tanking. Yeah, you can see Valu's tail is hanging down from the ceiling, as previously mentioned. This fight is pretty simple. You use the grappling hook to grab onto Valu's tail, swinging across the room, causing the ceiling to fall onto Goma, weakening her until her shell cracks. Then in the second phase, you just use the grappling hook to pull her downwards and slash her eye with your sword a bunch until she's dead. While it's not the most engaging fight gameplay-wise, the spectacle of it is really entertaining. Although this is lower on the ranked list, it's still a pretty fun dungeon. I really like swinging around using the grappling hook, creating platforms on the lava, and picking up my enemies' weapons. And again, the boss fight is very cool. It's a great starter dungeon. The Forbidden Woods is a simple little dungeon, but it's quite fun. The theming really appeals to me personally. I love the mystical forest aesthetic, teeming with living plants, insect creatures, and choo-choos. I also adore the music with its quiet, mysterious-sounding strings and flutes fading in and out. Just before the dungeon, you acquire the Deku Leaf, which allows you to glide across gaps and use gusts of wind to progress and take down enemies. Sort of an early precursor to modern Zelda's Paraglider. You're tasked with saving Makar, a Korok who went missing here. The dungeon is super linear, but it's got a lot of fun and engaging rooms along its linear path. The entire environment just feels so alive. You've got these plant bulbs that launch Link up into the air, you've got these wooden platforms that move around like arms, and you've got these giant tentacle vines that spring out of the ground. One of the slightly annoying aspects of this dungeon is these little spiky guys that stick to you and slow you down. They're frustrating at first, but if you do a quick spin attack, they're easily dealt with. Eventually you reach the mini-boss, this giant flying insect monster who shoots out the little spiky guys, but once you kill him, you get the dungeon item, the boomerang. The boomerang here works a lot like it did in Ocarina of Time, but with this one you're able to mark multiple targets at once before you throw, which allows you to solve puzzles by hitting diamond switches and cutting down vines. Eventually you use the boomerang to cut down this giant flower, which falls and busts through the floor to a lower part of the dungeon, where you do some light platforming and fighting to get to the boss key. Then you backtrack up to the boss room to fight Kale Demos, this giant plant creature. This fight is honestly very similar to Baranade from Ocarina of Time, where you use the boomerang to target his little arms. Once you've hit them all, the boss will fall down and open up, completely transforming the color of the room and revealing its weak point, this Venus flytrap looking guy in the center. You do that twice and the fight is over. It's really easy and honestly not a super engaging fight. I mean, it's a very cool boss visually, but I feel like Baranade was slightly more fun with the electrical shocks and the fact that he actually moved around the room. One really nice touch though is that if you grabbed some of the sacred forest water from the Forest Haven in a bottle before the dungeon, you can pour it on the boss to defeat it instantly. Yes, that does make this already easy boss even easier, but I just think it's a cute little touch and it's good for speedrunning. Overall, I don't really have many gripes about the Forbidden Woods. It's short and easy, but it's got great theming and music. The Deku Leaf is very fun to use, and the boomerang is also very dope. Plus, once you finish the dungeon and save Makar, he and all the other Koroks sing for you in this very cute moment. I love it. Tower of the Gods is such a cool concept for a dungeon. It was designed to be a challenge to test the courage and bravery of potential heroes. So, you gotta prove yourself to the gods by overcoming the puzzles and battles within. The tower rises from beneath the surface of the ocean, and you enter. And right off the bat, this dungeon is unique, in that it's the only dungeon where you get to bring your boat inside. And the music here is superb. The choirs of voices mixed with harps and strings really feels like music from the ancient world being sung by deities. This first floor will see you cruising along in your boat to different landings and entering rooms to solve a few puzzles and fight a few enemies. You'll have to find these statues and bring them to their pedestals, and once they're all in place, the entrance to the next floor opens. So, leaving your boat behind, you ascend upwards. On the second floor, you learn the Command Melody, a song that allows you to take control of these sentient statues. You're tasked with going off into 3 different areas and bringing 3 different statues to the central room, either by carrying them yourself, having them follow you, or taking control of them yourself. It's a neat little concept. In one of these 3 areas is the mini-boss, a Dark Nut, which is this game's version of the Iron Knuckles from back in Ocarina of Time. Though these guys are much easier than Iron Knuckles, and you have to use your parry attacks to take off their armor before you can actually damage them. Unlike the Iron Knuckles, where the skill of timing and dodging was much more important. Once you beat him, you get the dungeon item, the bow. It's pretty much functionally identical to how it was in the previous 3D Zelda titles, just point and shoot. Once you've brought all 3 statues to the central room, you're able to move on to the 3rd and final floor, which is essentially just one tiny button-pushing puzzle to get the boss key. Finally, you walk out this door and you're on the outside of the building ascending these stairs, defeating the Beamos and birds along the way to the boss room. And this is Godon. He was designed to be the final test for potential heroes, so this is it. Beat this guy and you will have proved your courage to the gods. And It's another classic Nintendo disembodied floating head and hands boss. It's pretty straightforward. You shoot the eyes on the hands, then the eyes on the head, and then when he's stunned, you throw a bomb into his mouth, rinse and repeat. While it's not a super hard boss, the spectacle of it being this final challenge does make it feel really cathartic to do. On top of that, once you beat Godon, you ascend to the very top of the tower and use your grappling hook to ring this giant bell. This moment just feels so triumphant, like, yeah, that's right, I have proven myself to the gods, here is my victory bell, I'm coming for you next, Ganon. Overall, while Tower of the Gods isn't super complex, it's a ton of fun to conquer, and its concept of being a courageous test is just really interesting. The Earth Temple's got a bit of sauce. It's dark and gloomy, filled with redeads and floating skulls. The music certainly reflects that with its wailing melodies and weird jaw harps. For this dungeon, you get to have a companion, Medli, the Rito girl you meet much earlier and save from the top of Dragon Roost Cavern. You have a few different ways of utilizing her to solve puzzles and traverse the dungeon. You can call her to have her follow you around, you can pick her up and use her to fly across small gaps, or you can use the command melody, which you previously learned in Tower of the Gods, to take control of Medli, using her to fly to certain areas that Link can't reach. You could also use her harp as a reflection tool to solve puzzles that involve light sources peeking in. It's a lot of fun solving puzzles with her, but I will say it can also get a bit tedious having to play the command melody over and over again every time you want to take control of her. This dungeon actually has some slightly more complex puzzles, mostly involving the reflection of light and block pushing. You and Medli have to progress room by room, defeating enemies and solving puzzles along the way until you eventually reach a mini-boss. It's this Stalfos that wields a giant mace. This guy is honestly much closer to the Iron Knuckles from Ocarina of Time than the Dark Nuts are. You can't just spam attacks, you have to watch when to dodge, as he'll spin around rapidly with his mace and do a significant amount of damage to you. Once you defeat one of them, two more pop out. Defeat them, and you finally get the dungeon item, the Mirror Shield, allowing Link to also reflect light. So now you and Medli can continue onwards and work on light puzzles together. You'll meet certain enemies like these Poes, who have to be hit by light before they can be attacked and killed. I've always really liked this central room where you have to both shine lights into the eyes of this giant statue to continue deeper into the dungeon. Eventually you make it down to the boss room, but you don't have the key yet, so you head even further down to solve one last puzzle, which is honestly one of the coolest and biggest puzzles in the entire game. You have this large room filled with light sources and mirrors, and you have to use both Link and Medli to reflect light in all these different areas around the room, finally allowing the two of you to once again shine light at the eyes of a giant statue. This gets you the boss key, so it's time to head back up and fight the boss. When you enter the boss room, all these Poes will be running around wildly. When they notice you, they all panic and jump into this giant mask, which grows and becomes an enormous Poe wielding a lantern. This is Jalhalla, and he's a really cool boss. You use your mirror shield to shine light at him, and then lift him up and throw him into the spiky walls, where he separates back into the smaller Poes, who you have to kill one by one. This is made much easier if you use the Hurricane Spin ability. After defeating a few, they'll form back into the big Poe, and you just have to keep repeating that process until all of them are defeated. I really like that once the mask is on his own, he panics and tries to run away, but one of the light sources hits him and just kills him right there. So then you and Medli and the spirit of an old Zora sage all perform a little symphony of sorts, which upgrades your Master Sword. The Earth Temple is a great dungeon with awesome gloomy theming, haunting music, cool companion mechanics, and an excellent boss fight. But it's not quite the best dungeon in the game for me. I just realized that there's been a trend with each of these ranking videos so far. The final main dungeon of the game always ends up being my favorite somehow, and the Wind Temple here is no exception. Again, this is a penultimate culmination of all the dungeons that came before. The theming here is awesome. It's a mix of both temple architecture and nature, with the grass and trees. The music is very fitting for the Wind Temple, as it's a lot of woodwind instruments backed by strings, playing this mysterious melody that feels almost cautioning to me. This time you're accompanied by Makar, the Korok you previously saved from the Forbidden Woods. Like Medli, you can have Makar follow you, you can pick him up and carry him, or you can take control of him. He can fly around like a little helicopter with his leaf propellers, and he's able to plant trees in these little spots, which somehow spawns chests, opens doors, and so on. The tediousness of using the command melody to take control of Makar is slightly lessened here, as you aren't required to control him as often as you did with Medli in the previous dungeon. This dungeon is the longest and most complex in the game. Now, it's not overly complex or anything, but there's plenty of puzzles and lots of more challenging combat. When you first enter, you solve a couple of puzzles with Makar, but then he is suddenly kidnapped. You find him locked away in a cell, so now it's a matter of breaking him out. So you veer off course to conquer a few different rooms until you reach the mini-boss, this Wizrobe that continues to spawn in more and more enemies until you take him down. Once you've defeated all the enemies in the room, you get the dungeon item, the Hook Shot, allowing you to grab onto these targets on the wall and fly across the room. You use the hookshot to break Makar out of jail, then continue onwards to conquer the second half of the dungeon together. You go and fight some dark nuts to pick up the boss key, go around a long side path solving puzzles and defeating enemies along the way, until you reach these buttons that open up to the bottom floor, where there's one final block pushing puzzle to get to the boss room. When you enter, you can see this vast room filled with sand and a giant Triforce crest in the middle. When you jump down, the room fills with more sand, and this giant sandworm comes flying out. This is Mulgara, and unlike Twin Mold from Majora's Mask, this sandworm is actually a ton of fun to take down. And oh my god, this is some of the best boss music in any Zelda game, it's incredible. So while Mulgara is burrowed into the sand, you gotta use the hookshot to grab his tongue and slash it with your sword. Some baby worms will spawn in, so you gotta yank him out of the sand and slash him as well. Sometimes Mulgara will fly up into the sky and try to come down on top of you, so you gotta be careful about that. Otherwise, it's just a repeat of slashing this guy's tongue until he's dead. It's a very fun and engaging fight, and the music helps immensely. Once you beat him, you conduct another little symphony with Makar and an ancient Kokiri sage, and then the Master Sword becomes fully restored and powered up. Awesome. Yeah, again, it's sort of an obvious trend for the final main dungeon to be the best in each of these games, but I want to say, you gotta be on your toes for the next video, because I can already tell you now, that will not be the case for Twilight Princess. Anyways, I'm getting sidetracked. The Wind Temple is quite awesome, and for me, it's my favorite dungeon in The Wind Waker. So there you have it, the Dungeons of Wind Waker. They're not the strongest in the series, but they're definitely not the weakest either. We'll get to those. Also with this video specifically, I didn't realize it until I was writing the script, but I literally ranked the dungeons in the order that you complete them. I guess in this game, each dungeon just gets better than the last, which is kind of cool for progression. You never feel like you're taking a step backwards in quality as you go along, which is good. Oh yeah, let me quickly rank the 3 mini dungeons from this game also. Number 3, Fire Mountain. This is barely even a mini dungeon, but you use ice arrows to freeze the mountain, climb up it, go in, fight a couple fire keys, and then open a chest to get the power bracelets. There's like literally nothing to it. Number 2, Ice Ring Isle. This one is barely better than Fire Mountain. You shoot fire arrows to stop the blizzard and then slide and platform your way inside. You fight a couple of ice keys as you slide your way to a chest to get the iron boots. The only difference here is there's an extra hidden section where you can fight some enemies to get an orange rupee. Cool, I guess. And number 1, Savage Labyrinth. Basically just a giant enemy gauntlet, 50 floors of fights. Doing the first 30 floors is required in the main quest to get a Triforce shard, but if you finish all of them, you get the Hero's Charm, allowing you to see the health bars of enemies. I think the most ridiculously funny thing about the Savage Labyrinth though, is the fact that it's located mere feet away from Link's grandma's house where he literally grew up. Apparently 50 floors worth of the scariest monsters ever has just been there the whole time under this rock. Literally insane. But yeah, that's it for this one. See ya.